Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Meteorologist Edward Shaw. We're going to be looking at quite a bit here over the next few hours as this system develops and continues to head within our region here over the next few hours. So let's get right into it because we got a lot to talk about. As you can see right now, already seeing severe thunderstorm watches extending pretty much everywhere west of Montgomery County, most of the New River Valley, quite a bit of Tennessee, Kentucky, and the far northwestern parts of North Carolina. Now, let's do good news first. Good news is this is not a tornado watch. Right now with this system, tornado threat is very low. It is not zero, but it's low. So where is everything right now and when is it going to end up hitting us? Let's time all that out. So right now you can see most of this system is over central and eastern Kentucky, starting to get its way into parts of our region, up towards Buchanan, parts of West Virginia. And as we go here over the next few hours, it'll pretty quickly enter areas such as Bluefield within the area. Now, as for when it hits our viewing area, essentially, it started getting close. We're seeing a little bit of residual rainfall out towards Wytheville, but overall, this storm is moving a little bit slower than initially anticipated, so it'll be a little bit of time, probably about 30-40 minutes before it ends up within the New River Valley at its totality. Now, from a wider standpoint, this is one thing that we want to be looking at. You can see quite a bit of areas over parts of Kentucky that have flood alerts in effect, given some of that heavy rainfall that people have seen. The biggest thing we're seeing is quite a few hail reports, and a lot of these are about quarter size, which is about an inch in diameter, with a few getting up to about a $half size inch. So some of these, certainly, it's not baseball size hail. That was the threat we actually had yesterday, but as we know, we did not get that, thankfully, because the cap, which is where the atmosphere has a little bit of a layer of dry air that prevents a lot of this from sparking up. Now, looking at what we're currently seeing, you see that tornado watch that was just issued further out to the west. That is for a secondary system that's going to go through our area later tonight. Now, it's going to be much weaker by the time it gets to us, but it could still produce some notable thunderstorms and a few downpours. Further up to the east, it's a very weirdly set up system. But we have another severe risk further up in parts of New Jersey, where there's actually 2 tornado warnings right now in Atlantic and Cumberland. Those producing a lot of lightning, and that's going to be something we see quite frequently within this storm, which is why it's so important to just stay inside if you absolutely can, and even just avoid getting on the roads. So let's go ahead and turn off our lightning layer real quick just to look at this overall setup with this storm. You see that little cylinder that popped up right there? That was indicative of some pretty strong rotation on that storm. But alas, there's not a tornado warning in place. It's normal for supercells to have rotation in them. It's naturally an occurring feature of them. However, just because it's a supercell does not mean it could produce a tornado. It certainly can, and they almost always are the cause of tornadoes. But these are going to be too high up in the atmosphere, which is why they're going to be major causes of hail and potential wind destruction. Now, let's go into what the Storm Prediction Center is saying, because this is something that we 100% want to keep in mind when these storms are entering our area. So the SPC Day 1 risk. So as of this morning, we initially were not in any bit of an enhanced risk, but it was knocking on our door in parts of West Virginia. That has since been extended to our viewing area, including most of the New River Valley and parts of I-81, as well as the western half of our DMA. Now, further to the east, still a slight risk, a level 2 out of 5, but the fact that this enhanced risk has marched further east is due to the fact that we're likely going to see some pretty damaging winds with this system. And that's the main thing that the Storm Prediction Center saw when they continued to issue this risk. This is your significant wind risk. This is not just the wind risk overall. This is what we would see normally if we were looking at this and we didn't have any kind of wind, or if we had just a regular severe warned wind risk. Overall, these are about 70 mile per hour plus winds. However, the fact this is what's known as more of a hatched risk, which is significant hail or significant wind. If it was hatched for hail, like what we had for parts of yesterday, that would mean we could end up seeing hail that's about baseball sized. Not the case today. Today we could see a few isolated cases of large hail, but the biggest threat is going to be the winds. And that significant wind risk is the main reason we're now enhanced in parts of the New River Valley, because winds could be prolonged, they could be extremely destructive. We've already seen reports further out to the west that they've knocked over trees, stripped power lines from power poles, all kinds of different issues. So that's going to be something that you 100% want to take seriously. Even though it's just wind, it doesn't sound like the worst thing in the world. It sounds like something we deal with every day. This is going to be something you want to take seriously and just try to stay off the roads, try to stay inside if at all possible with this system. Now, I mentioned the tornado threat and the hail threat earlier. So let's take a look at that real quick. The tornado threat, again, very low, but it is not zero. You can see the Storm Prediction Center has most of our viewing area under that 2% at any given point, with a 5% further out to the west. Now, compare that to what's going on in most of Kentucky, southern parts of Illinois, Indiana, parts of Tennessee even. Vastly different story. There's probably going to be some kind of tornado outbreak further out to the west. So if you know anybody that lives in that shaded red area, you might want to make sure that they're aware of what's coming their way. Significant tornado risk, this is essentially saying the chance of an EF2 or stronger tornado. And that's pretty significant right there. Certainly not something that anybody in there wants to take lightly, and it's not something you typically see within severe weather setups. You'll usually see the risk that we have for like this, but that's certainly going to be one that's pretty damaging. Hail risk, again, 15%, just under wind in terms of what we can expect, and that's just given the overall setup of this storm system. So here's what we'll do now. Let's take a wider view. You can see where we're starting to see some storms brewing further out to the west. That's something that you're going to want to start looking at, and that's going to be the main area that's going to see storm development is right there, and it's going to end up following pretty much the same exact path and intensifying over that western part of Kentucky and into southern parts of Illinois and Indianapolis, or in Indiana. Now, what can we expect for this? Well, again, the biggest risk is going to be damaging winds. So if there's anything outside that could blow around, cause damage to your house, your vehicles, definitely want to get it somewhere where it's not going to blow around. That would obviously be the right idea. Now, you can see some of that pink that's in those cells. These are actually starting to weaken a little bit more, but it's not those that worry me. It's the ones that haven't formed that do. Right now, if you stepped outside, you notice it just feels hot. It feels humid, just muggy outside, and that's pretty indicative of a lot of energy for storms to go off of when they end up firing up. So let's take it back to our DMA view real quick, and now we're going to go through what a lot of the models are saying and what Futurecast is saying. Now, full disclaimer before I pull up Futurecast. Right now, the models are not going to handle the short-term future very well. Just that's a technological limitation, and the variability of weather is something that they can't adapt to within minutes. It's something that's more of an hourly focus. So what's going to end up happening is we're going to start shifting. Once we start seeing this region of storm coverage get more and more into our viewing area, that's when we're going to shift to something called nowcasting. Now, it seems kind of self-explanatory, but essentially it's going to shorten the window we have to about an hour before at the most. That's going to be the maximum time frame that we see for when we can expect a storm to hit any given location. That's our timeline. It could be a little bit less than that, given if some of these cells pop up and develop very quickly. But right now, given the case, we're just watching to see how this enters our region and what happens in terms of severe weather warnings. Again, you don't see any tornado warnings, and the only tornado warnings we have seen have been up in New Jersey, of all places. Now, so let's go into Futurecast, now that I've gotten that out of the way. What we're going to end up seeing, so you can see where that system is right now over parts of West Virginia and preparing to enter our viewing area. As that hints further and further inland, you're going to notice we start seeing more storms develop kind of on the backside and almost right over parts of south side. That first round, the storms that exist currently are not the biggest worry. They could produce a few rumbles of thunder, maybe some downpours, but they're going to weaken as they cross the mountains and come into our region. This is a different story. About 6 p.m. today, then we end up mostly clear until about midnight. Now, that's going to be when we start seeing more heavy rain come in, and then the potential for a few rumbles of thunder, maybe some gusty winds, and then Saturday morning about 5 a.m. we'll likely be seeing some heavier rainfall within the region, so that's going to be something we got to look for as well. Now, as for that rainfall early Saturday, it's going to start fading pretty quickly. That cold front passes, and we end up actually quite nice for Saturday afternoon and evening, believe it or not. So a little bit of good news there for you. But again, we get through today and we get through tomorrow morning, we will be completely fine in terms of what we're saying tomorrow. Now, let's take it real quickly. Let's look at each of our sky cams. And you can see it's starting to get a little bit on the darker side out there. We have a lot of energy trapped beneath this cloud cover. And the more cloud cover we end up seeing, the better, in fact, we're going to end up having today. Now, one thing I noticed with that model is that it's backing off a little bit on some of the more intense hail cores that we've seen over the past few hours. That's good. That may be to the fact that we're seeing more cloud cover. But again, keep in mind, once these storms start getting closer and closer, our view starts narrowing a little bit more, and we're going to be relying more on data like radar, like satellite data, rather than weather models. So that's overall what we're looking at right now. So again, biggest threat by far, damaging a straight line wind damage. Quarter-size hail has already been reported in this system further out to the west. Very well could be something we see here. And there's a low, but non-zero, tornado risk. So you should be prepared as if there is a tornado, but there's, knock on wood, there's a very low chance of one actually happening. Hopefully that didn't just get jinxed. We'll see. Overall, that's kind of the overall feeling of what we're expecting. High temperatures today are certainly playing a role in why we're seeing what we're seeing. Temperatures getting up into the mid to upper 80s. It's providing the heat energy. Now you combine that with the overall moisture that we have seen within our region, and the two of those things combined are going to lead to that storm energy risk, something called CAPE, convective available potential energy, for the more scientifically jargon. But again, biggest thing I'm watching is going to be how these cells play out, what forms over us, and then what ends up happening with this severe weather watch. Because I would not be surprised whatsoever if we end up seeing that severe thunderstorm watch extend further out to the east. Those hail indicators further up to the northeast towards Harrisonburg and Charlottesville, those were reports of hail from last night from the system that we saw, which was very isolated, but there were still some pretty hefty pieces of hail up there, which is actually right on tap with what a lot of models and forecasts were saying. So again, timing this out one more time. Later this afternoon, I'd say about 2 p.m. at the earliest. 3 p.m. is probably the most reasonable time to go with, until about 6 or 7. Once this storm gets into the area, we're going to be monitoring it. We'll do some more streams later on today. We'll be posting. Obviously, we'll be live on air, so you can watch us then. But with this overall system, just be aware that could very well produce some pretty damaging winds, quarter-sized hail, maybe a stray tornado, and some localized flooding in some of these cells that produce some of those hefty downpours, similar to what we've seen here in the past few days. As we know, this has been a very inclement weather week. There has been rain almost every single day. let's be real, the weather has just been straight up terrible for the last 5 or 6 days. Luckily, though, we go into tomorrow afternoon and evening, it gets a little bit calmer. So keep that in mind. If you do have any plans for being outside, push it back till tomorrow. Trust me, you will not regret it. We'll continue to keep you updated with how this whole thing plays out. Again, anticipating this coming in within the next 2 or 3 hours at the latest with some of these stronger storms. But overall, we're going to keep an eye on it, and you should as well. Make sure you have our weather app. We'll be sending out notifications and updates based on this, and be sure to follow all of us on our social media pages and the WSLS page itself. We're going to be updating pretty frequently for the rest of the day, just given the overall nature of this system. And stay safe out there.